Wednesday, halfway through the week. Word for you today, our lesson today is build an altar. Well, what is an altar? Well, an altar is something that is something is placed on it of great importance, or it's a way of worshiping or honoring God or something. Genesis chapter 12, verse 7 says, "But the Lord appeared to Abram and said, 'To your offspring I will give this land.' So Abram built an altar there to the Lord, who had appeared to him." Abram has left his home and his family, and he's gone to a land that God told him to go. And as they come to Canaan, the land God has led him to, God appeared to Abram and gave him a promise. God promised Abram the land of Canaan, and he said Abram's descendants would be the recipients of the promise. He didn't say Abram, but he said Abram's descendants. So Abram then built an altar. He built something to remind himself and to remind others of this promise that God had made. And it showed Abram's faith. He took God at his word. See, the land didn't belong to him yet, or to his descendants. But he built this altar saying, this is what God said, and I know it's going to happen. And then he also showed his gratitude for God, to God, for caring about him. So he built this altar. How about you? Do you have any altars? Sometimes we might call them spiritual markers. Something that shows an event or a time or something that God has done in our lives. We actually, all of us have some of them at home. Usually they're pictures. They're pictures of family members. And since that's a spiritual marker, we're grateful to God for some of these people that God has put into our lives. So, what has God done for you that you would build an altar or a spiritual marker for? They're reminders of what God's done in our lives, and it usually indicates a major event or some way that he moved in our life. Spiritual markers also give testimony of events that made a difference in our lives. In our home, we have a block of wood, and my wife Rhoda she's very artistic, and she took a little wood burning kit, and she burned into the wood a picture of a church, and there was something that happened that required faith on our part, and we prayed about it, and then we did it, and we saw God do what only God could do. It was miraculous. It was incredible. And so we have this block of wood in our home, and every time I go by, I look at it, I'm reminded of what God did. Now, we didn't do it. Did it require faith on our part? Yes, it did. But we couldn't have done what was done. Only God could have done that. And if you're like me, we tend to forget things. My kids said some of the cutest things when they were kids. When they were growing up, they were little. They said some of the cutest things. And I knew I'd never forget them. And for this day, I have no idea what it was they said, but I just know they said some things that were cute. I wish I'd have written them down. That's what a spiritual marker does. It's something that reminds us of something that God did. You say, well, you'll always remember that. Well, maybe we will, maybe we won't. We also have on our wall something that somebody made, and it has a scripture passage on it. And it's a scripture passage that meant a lot to Rhoda when she was struggling at a certain issue in her life. And every time we go by that, we see that. I remember growing up, there was a little plaque as a kid, plaque in our home. And it said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," coming from Joshua. What has God done in your life that only God can do? Or what has he done in your life that meant a lot to you? Have you made something? It doesn't have to be artistic. It doesn't have to be beautiful. Just something that reminds you. Every time you go by, it reminds you what God has done. Has God done anything for you? Can you think of anything? You know, he's done something for all of us. And if you can't think of anything, now would be a real good time just to talk to God and say, God, what is it that you have done in my life that's made a difference? And just ask him to remind you. Or watch and see something that God has done to remind you. We take pictures of our kids, of our grandkids, and we update those pictures as they get older as a constant reminder of our family members. Well, that's what a spiritual marker is. It's something to remind us of what God has done. This week, find something. Remember something that God has done, and then find a way to illustrate that and put it on the wall or put it on the table or something that will constantly remind you what God has done. Have a good day.